Okay, so this was a long one here. Feels like I've been working on this like all day, every day for like 2 weeks straight, and maybe it was a little more than that. But so glad to be on the other side of this. There's a lot to say, and I'm gonna have to explain the stage and phases. So there's like 5 variants, but I'll show you the like complete one at the end. Okay, let's start with like phase one, and I'm gonna talk about what's different from the normal version. Okay, so let's see almost everything I can remember that's changed. First off, the buildings glow now. This background animation of the buildings, it glows now. Or like the twinkling lights on the building. Also the stars, which thankfully cldz had a version of the stars animation in his version, thankfully. Because like getting those sprites would have been a giant nightmare if I could even have pulled it off at all. And up here on the right side, there's also more stars. The game, you can't see higher this in the game, and there's like unanimated stars up there, so I purposely cropped them off. But if somebody wants to have a little bit more visibility and doesn't mind seeing unanimated stars, you could probably increase the bound high by 20 and still get away with it. Okay, so these cops, this cop here with the shotgun, JC had him placed behind this truck in the back, but he's actually between these two vehicles. So I moved him back into position of these two vehicles. Also, I think one of his sprites was misaligned. So I corrected that. I think it was this cop, but one of the cops had like the top of their sprite cut off on one of the frames. So I restored that as well. This cop here with he's like, signaling the move in. This like frame where he's like stationary, when at the end of his like hand swings, it would just snap back into place before it needs a frame to like transition back into the squat, and he was missing that. I restored that. Let's call this bubblegum cop over here. He was missing the big bubble frame right before it pops. At first I thought like it was just like he was hanging on like the middle frame longer before it popped it into his mouth, but no, there was a missing frame that's like there before that. Okay, so the cop on the walkie-talkie and the bubblegum cop have extra frames that I didn't realize, where she stops and looks at the camera in a second. That was missing, and when he pulls his gun and points at the camera, that was missing. If cldz didn't have those in his version of the file, I wouldn't even notice they were not missing there, because you won't see those in game unless you shake the floor. Like, she won't look at the camera unless you shake the floor, and he won't point the gun at you unless you shake the floor. So I didn't notice that at first when I was just like reviewing the source game. So there's like a cop hidden back here. I'll get back to him in a second. Yeah, this cop behind this van. So there was some more to do with him. This van was in the wrong position. It was down too far, if I remember correctly. Corrected that. This dog was in the wrong position. I think he was also down too far. Corrected him. All the colors, every last color on every last sprite was messed up. So I had to correct every color and all the palettes. It was like, I think just that alone took a few days, because there was just so much to correct. Okay, so on the side of the ambulance here, there was this like weird square that appeared sometimes. I cut that out. It didn't look right. I mean, maybe it was intentional, but it didn't look right. And also there was this like super dark patch that would appear here, like as the pink hit it. That also might have been intentional, but it looks like maybe it was just like a bad palette messed up, so I corrected it with the rest of using also with the pink hit, like the darker pinks from the rest of the pink frames up here around here. Touch that up. If I didn't say it already, underneath the cop cars had these like blackish rectangles cut out of them. It kind of feels like he was like getting ready to like separate the tires from the rest of the shading, but didn't like commit to it or something, the original sprite artist. So that's corrected. The traffic light was missing a frame. Like one of the little, yeah, I think like one of the, when he like dimmed the most, it was missing one of the frames, so I restored the traffic light. I think there was something wrong with this animation too, that I fixed, but I can't quite remember. So just here in phase 1, we got quite a lot of stuff going on and fixes to the old version. Now let's look at phase 2 and I'll talk about that. So this is phase 2, the underneath. I redid the rats. That's like the thing I did last because the rats are a total nightmare that come out of this hole. One of the big differences in the rats besides that was like the final frame when the rat goes into this like doorway here was completely missing from the original version. So yeah, like that final like flash there was just completely missing before. Restored that. I also like I was going to try to do the rats so they were like absolutely perfect, but it's kind of a lost cause because in the game it's not just one rat animation, it's probably like 3, maybe even 4 rats that are overlaid on top of each other. And they're all like just a little bit off. And trying to screenshot to figure out where each rat, there's no good way to tell like what frame belongs to which rat, and they get really like on top of each other and stuff. And I think one rat might be like jumping further than the rest. So like total nightmare. I was already like screenshotting up to like nearly 170 different positions before I realized it just wasn't going to fly and I was getting nowhere. So yeah, I kind of redid that rat animation, try to make it look a little smoother than it used to as well. In the game, one of the rats like noticeably runs faster than the other rats. I also sort of tried to adapt that as well. So every once in a while you'll see a rat come down here and just really fire across the screen. Okay, so this drop here, it was missing all the like frames after it hit. So like these splash frames from the drop that falls off this pipe, like all those splash frames were missing basically. And worse, there was like a black line that would appear when it hit the bottom. And I thought it was a part of a rat at first, but no, it was attached to a bad drop that had like, it wasn't cleaned properly, so a little black line kept appearing. So this drop and the one on the left, that's also falling to a pipe. I had to redo all of this besides just repalleting. So 10 tons of screenshot taken to try to figure where everything was. And I think it was missing a bunch of the top frames too. Like you see this kind of like X spark that appears for a second. I had to kind of like lock down all the positions of where the drop transitions into different sparks. Because it like starts at an X spark, it goes straight, and then it turns into another sort of like spark right before it hits. Had to lock down those positions. Do that all right. And if we jump up way up here, there's 3 more drops. And all 3 of these drops in the center were like missing their upper halves, like all the frames of the upper halves. And I almost missed this myself, but if you watch like super closely, like up here, there's this little like almost like downward triangle that appears for like a millisecond before the drop falls down. Like it flashes a couple times and then the drop falls. I almost missed that myself. But yeah, once again, I had to like screenshot the hell out of these and like try to lock down all their positions of when they change from each thing to change from like the X to the straight to this little like cross shape right before the impact. Locked all those down. That was frustrating, but at least like doable. It's just workload. The sewer back wall, I tried to make its deltas match closer to the source game than it used to be. So like before, I think it was started like more halfway up than it needs to be. Like this is exactly how much you see at default in the source game before you start pulling up. Oh, some of the rat sprites, I replaced them all basically and redid how they were done because he like had the same sprite in there 10 times, like probably like 100 times. I basically just shaved it down to like 20. But even in his 20, like a bunch of the rat sprites were just damaged and were like missing the top lines and stuff, like were clipped off of them. So I restored all that. Okay, I don't think there's anything else to talk about down here before I go into the transition. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff to say about the transition version now. Okay, so the reason I built off Juan Carlos's version and not one of the other versions is because, oh man, it's almost 10 minutes of this already, is because Juan Carlos was the only one with the transition. And I really wanted the transition in my version. Okay, so let's go over to the left here. See this police van? Now, as the thing transitions, this police van is going to change. And after, I also lengthened the transition because the transition was going off way too fast in Juan Carlos's original version. So the screen will shake. So when like you hit the van, your character into the van moves to the left. And it has, yeah, see this, the first screen shake, the van moved to the left. The second, it gets even more busted up. And then the third, it like buffs up and the door pops off. None of the versions had the final damage train of the van or the door popping off. That's all new to this version. Okay, so I'm done talking about the van, but there's more to talk about. Okay, so like this floor will crack. Like in the game, you have to like hit a character against the floor to make it crack, and that's what makes the transition happen. You can just imagine some other force is making the like earthquake effect happening in this Mugen version. But yeah, so eventually they'll see the floor cracking around the center. And I want you to pay super close attention to like the background of the floor here once it breaks. So yeah, it's break, shake one, no break detected, but it's just to move the van. Shake two, it cracks. Boom, cracks more. And then it collapses. Now okay, so in the game, there's a big difference in the transition than was in Juan Carlos's transition. Now, if you would have jumped up top before in Juan Carlos's version, you would have seen the same thing you just saw, like the cops on the top with the dogs and the cop cars and everything. But in the source game, after you fall down here, and like it transitions probably, the next time you jump up top, the top has changed completely. And so up top, there is now like this sewer lid thing or a ladder leading up to it, and this like flashing ripped edge of the floor. And if you go over here, you also see this side of it. And if you look closely back there, you'll notice like the sky has changed, and you're now looking like kind of upward, up top of the buildings where like the traffic light. Like you can't see the cop cars anymore, but it's like the angle you're looking at it changed, or at least that's what Capcom's going for. So yeah, I tried to make that closer to source accurate, so after the transition you see the new top. And I also tried to make it so the spacing matched the game, so like this is about how far the traffic light looks above the floor once you jump up this high in the game. So I tried to make that match. Now, there is one change from the game here. You see these like green buildings that are like back there from like the regular background. In the source game, or at least my Saturn copy, this is just black void here behind the traffic light. But in my opinion, a black void in a Mugen stage just looks like the stage is broken. So I just put the same buildings that would be back there next to the traffic light buildings and stuff to patch up the hole. I think it looks a little better that way. Like I said, Black Void and Mugen just looks like your stage is broken, even if it isn't. I think that's pretty much everything I have to say. Man, you know there's a lot of changes if the video takes 14 minutes to explain it all. But anyway, enjoy, guys.